My background is in production, but I was also general manager at Cerebral Fix for 4 years before breaking away with 2 others and starting Black Salt Games. Today, I'm going to be talking about leadership, relationships, and trust. But I want to start with why what I'm talking about is important to the creation of long-lived companies that continually deliver value to both its customers and its employees. So, companies and teams are communities, not machines. And this is a very different way of thinking about things than what we might be used to. In a machine, we're expecting a set output for a set input. So we press button, machine turns on. Think about how we troubleshoot problems with machines. We try and isolate a specific component and repair or replace it. Dealing with communities is a very different type of thing, though. It's more complicated. There are more variables and inputs shown by how just adding or removing someone from a development team doesn't magically solve delivery problems. In the 1950s, the average lifespan of a company on the Standard & Poor's 500 was 60 years. These days, it's less than 20. In the 1980s, a team from Shell were tasked with looking at companies that were market leaders in their industry and older than 100 years old. They didn't find many, but they did find some, and they looked at what was common across the companies. What they found was that companies that stand the test of time, that last longer, way longer than the average lifespan of a company, are those that see themselves as a living community. One that knows that they will encounter major global changes every 50 years and many technology changes in between those times, and prepare for that by training their organization as a community. Now, imagine your company or team as a community for a second. What does it look like? Does it provide everything it needs for all of its members? Is it the type of community that's laid out well with amenities for all? Or is there a gated community with lush mansions, but if you're not in the in crowd, you don't get access to any of that? Are people working together to address and improve the rundown parts of the community? Or are they focused on shoring up their own shelter? With machines, we don't expect them to last forever. We know if we take good care of them, they will last longer, sure, but we expect machines to either break down over time or become redundant with technology changes. You would approach the long-term guardianship of a community very differently, I hope. With communities, we also realize that there's no end to the improvements that we can make for the people living in them, and that over time, our understanding of what creates a good community is going to change, and that the environment, the culture, and the support and facilities we've put in place can evolve with them. So what does good leadership of a community look like? The first thing we know when we say a community leader is we're not necessarily talking about the mayor or council CEO who develop and define the rules and policies and look after the facilities. A community leader is a person that runs the local Girl Guides or Scouts, someone who organizes a community cleanup or organizes relief for a family in need. Leaders in the community are not appointed. They are usually driven by passion to create a positive change in their community, to make people's lives better. However, good leadership does require a few more things than just taking on a cause. Creating a positive change in people's lives requires that you understand enough to know what will be a positive change, and then to create the environment where people feel safe enough to engage with that change. So let's talk about trust. Trust is knowing. In a relationship, it means knowing whether someone has your back and wants the best for you, knowing whether they care about your well-being, and whether you have the room to make mistakes. You can obviously trust someone not to have your back, trust that making a mistake is not going to go down well. And those are clearly attributes that we don't desire in leadership. In those situations, do we give those environments our all, go above and beyond? No. Not for very long will we continue investing in something that we only get the bare minimum return out of. Good trust is knowing that you can answer those questions in the affirmative. A good relationship with a friend, romantic partner, business partner, parent or boss means that they have your back and want the best for you, and that you have the room to be human and make mistakes. You, of course, afford them the same courtesies for those that you have these good relationships with. Now, think about all of your past bosses or project managers for a second, even teachers. If they were to come to you and say, "It doesn't look like this is going to be finished on time. What can we do about it?" Now, do you hear, "Should we be reviewing the scope? Do we need to inform anyone impacted by this? Have you been slacking off? Do you not know how to do your job?" Is your answer, "It depends on the person I'm thinking about"? Because you're right, both in how it's meant and how it's interpreted. And that's a very critical, sometimes even fatal flaw that we always forget. Our truth is not someone else's truth. What we mean is not necessarily what someone else hears. Every time you consider introducing a change in a team or organization, you haven't considered everything. I know this because every single time I've tried to introduce an organizational change and then ask the organization about it, there have been points of view that just never occurred to me, and I was actively trying to plan for every consideration. One example is my suggestion that Cerebral Fix be completely open internally about pay bands that everyone in the company was in. I was absolutely positive that this was going to be a good idea. As general manager, I not only already knew what everyone was paid, I helped set those pays and salaries. The way to catch any bias or discrimination in our pay structures would be to open it up to wider opinions. And at this point in time, with only management knowing what people were paid, that gave all of the negotiation power to the management team and none to the employees. What I learned, however, from the feedback was that some people were concerned that if others were made aware that they were formally more senior to them, that would change relationships and power dynamics between colleagues and possibly lead to expectations and pressure where it wasn't wanted or needed. That lack of insight or naivety isn't a criticism of us as leaders, as long as we account for it. It's just that we haven't experienced what everyone else has experienced. We all enter new relationships with different baggage. Our history of being isolated or held back, openly persecuted because of some attribute or behavior that we have, our deference or lack of deference to perceived authority, and our ability to articulate in high-pressured or emotional situations. All of us approach this world and other people with a completely unique understanding. So let's look at our relationship with authority for a second. I think you could have handled that situation better. You might craft this statement differently, but out of these people, who would you feel comfortable saying something like that to? Oh, interesting formatting. Now, of those people that you're comfortable with giving that feedback to, were you still comfortable when you first met them? As a leader, you want the type of team or organization that no matter what your position, anyone can approach you in a well-meaning way and that you are open to learning from it. The human capabilities that are most critical to the success of a community, it being more inviting, more innovative, and more resilient to an ever-changing world, are the ones that need to be inspired and facilitated, not mandated. You can't command initiative, creativity, or passion. They are gifts that, and every day, employees choose whether to bring them to work or leave them at home. So we can't just say, you're all empowered to make the company stuff that lots of people want to buy, and people magically organize into a cohesive and perfectly aligned unit, unfortunately. Okay, mid-talk recap. The longest living companies are those that see their organizations as communities, not machines. Treating companies as an evolving community facilitates innovation and resilience. People all have different models of behavior and ways of approaching new relationships. Relationships are built on trust, and as a leader, you need to build good trust to inspire a successful community. So let's build this thing called good trust. Most of this talk is going to be about facilitating something worthwhile to your employees or team members to inspire them to gift the organization with their passion. But we're going to start with some foundational concepts, and I'm going to use our old pal Maslow's hierarchy of needs to help illustrate this. You might already be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I'm going to do a quick overview in case it is new to anyone here. So Maslow's model basically breaks down human motivations to achieve our needs and the ways in which it influences our behaviors. The bottom two tiers of safety needs and physiological needs are called deficiency needs. And that just means that we only really spend a lot of energy thinking and focusing on them when we feel there's a deficiency in them. So if we were starving, we would spend a lot of our energy thinking about and trying to access food. But once we're secure in the knowledge that we'll always be able to access food when we need it, it takes up a whole lot less of our headspace, usually. Same thing with money. If we're tight on cash, we're going to be spending a lot of time weighing up prices and what we're spending and where the money for the next payment's going to go. Now, an organization obviously has an impact on this. If you're not paying your staff enough or regularly enough that they need to worry about how they're going to make rent or the other payments, if you're crunching your teams so they're not able to get the required downtime and sleep that we need to function optimally as a human being, then you're making it a lot harder on yourself if you're trying to access their talents and abilities. But how do you actually go about inspiring empowerment? You know, all of these companies have these really great vision statements and values, but we often struggle to figure out how to actually realize those vision. We know you can't just say, you're empowered, and everyone's like, oh, right, cool. And then things just magically happen. But what else can you do? So a workplace can provide opportunities for continuous learning and improvement of your craft, recognition of your talents, and a stage to inspire others, even the ability to provide guidance to others and support when they're struggling. The organizations that do are rewarded by their employees with gifts of people who are self-actualized. So it's really important that we try and figure out how to unlock it, but how to do that. In my case, I asked the company. I asked them how much of a voice they currently had in decision-making in the direction of the company. I also asked them how much of a voice they wanted in those things. The difference between the two answers, I thought, might be the sort of things that are blocking people from being able to achieve their true potential for the company. Now, again, it's important to point out here that different people have different takes, both on what they're happy to accept and the level of responsibility they want to take on. But when the majority of your company is telling you that it works one way and they want it to work another, then you have to listen to that or accept that people won't be fully investing and engaging and eventually will likely look at other opportunities that provide them more. Let me show you an example. The way this model is set up is identifying 7 levels of authority. It was originally developed for teams to make clear with their project managers and what they expected of the team structures, but I thought it could be more. In this first survey, I asked the company about things like strategy, performance reviews, hiring, pay structures, and the first question I asked was how much influence over these areas did people feel they currently had? I then asked them how much they wanted. I took a lot away from this first survey. The 2 biggest things, though, were obviously that most people felt they had no say in the majority of the decisions made in the company and wanted more input. Secondly, people want good leaders. People want competent people to guide, facilitate their input, and determine the best course of action based on that input. Most of all, I had been given a mandate by the people to bring about positive change. This told me that they wanted leadership of the company to change the way things were run and, along with our company values, dictated what that change should look like. So we needed to make a lot of changes in a lot of areas, but changes that the company agreed with. I also needed to accept that people can simultaneously desire change, as I was being told here, while being reluctant to engage in change when you don't know what the final outcome's going to be. I started softly. We didn't have much of a performance review process at that time, so that wasn't changing much in the status quo by introducing them. I researched different ways of doing performance reviews, thought about how it could provide value to the company as well as the reviewee. I suggested the structure it could be and asked for feedback. People suggested changes, they were incorporated, and the first person to go through the new process was me, slightly altered to allow anonymous feedback from everyone in the company if they wanted to give it. I invited everyone who wanted to come to review it with me, and then when everyone else had been through the process, they provided feedback on it as well. We iterated it again, now that we knew more, but most importantly, that feedback showed that people felt that they got value out of the process, not just the company. So 6 months later, when I did the Delegated Authority survey again, I hoped to see a change, and I did. This was what the company had originally said their input into these areas were when we first did the survey. And 6 months later, performance reviews were much closer to where people wanted them to be. And other similarly rolled out changes in some other areas also saw improvement. Staff were also wanting more of a role in deciding company processes and hiring procedures. After 18 months, we had aligned quite a few of the categories and were only slight changes away from meeting others. Does this have an impact on the bottom line, though? Over this period, our utilisation grew 35%. Our total staff only increased by 4%. But really awesomely, our staff turnover decreased by 70%. So it wasn't just with the same amount of people, it was with the same people that we were earning 44% more as a company. The next question is, can this scale? You see here us getting hiring and salary and bonuses right, showing that this sort of thing can work through hiring. Now, you might have picked up on my repetition. I regularly ran surveys, firstly every 3 or so months, and then every 6 months when people said that they could go a bit longer between them. And when I went about bringing something in, it was always in the same manner. A suggested structure, cycles of feedback in different ways to allow for people to provide that feedback in a way that was comfortable for them. Always with enough time for people to digest how that change was going to affect them, and if they were that way inclined, to think how it might affect others as well. Every time something rolled out, it was in this manner. Let's talk about predictability. So politicians, service providers, your favorite sports team. It's not sexy, but what we want in life is predictability with specifically curated areas of spontaneity. We're a species of forward planners, and the vast majority of us, when presented with a situation where we're not sure of what is expected with us or how an outcome will be determined, feel a level of anxiety around that. Sorry, let me find where I'm at. But as we see from the results, this was an effective process to make meaningful change on a wide-reaching scale across our company. It allowed for the adaptation and opinions over time as people grew and changed. It allowed people to experience more responsibility and then change their mind about it, whether that was a want for more responsibility or less. Self-actualization, along with continuous improvement, isn't a goal to be achieved, but a state of mind. This is a model that as things become addressed, they can take a lower level of our focus and energy as other things move in, just like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, this particular structure might not be suitable for your context, but what I think a great team culture that uplifts both everyone associated with it and as a byproduct, the bottom line, needs leaders that, firstly, build structures that allow people to evolve the level of responsibility for decision-making they desire, facilitate the level of input they desire, allow people to trust in the process of change via predictability, and see that their input is taken into account. And finally, allow the company and its people to expand and progress its scope of focus over time. Ngā mihi nui. If any of the quotes caught your fancy, then I have details of them up on blacksaltgames.com/NZGDC21. Feel free to hit me up via email or Twitter, or come chat to myself or Joel and Alex while you're at NZGDC. If you're around tonight for the Indie Biz Showcase, then please come and check out our new demo dredge. I think we have time for questions, hopefully, which I didn't tell you about earlier. But yeah, if there's any questions, please go. Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, if you can ask them through the app. We've got, how did you define utilization? So that's basically, are you working on a project that is earning money? At Cerebral Fix, we're a work-for-hire studio, and so utilization is very much based on work-for-hire projects. Your utilization might be, I guess, a different, different equation, though. Who's that? Yeah. Yes. Kia ora. Mm-hmm.
Something along there. One thing I noticed
Yep. So that's basically, how did I come to define what people were actually saying that they wanted in terms of the, is there a way to go back? Yes, cool. In terms of these kind of figures. So yeah, we asked the whole company, and you're right, different people have different levels of, some people are happy to sit in the, yep, tell me what to do, and I will execute that, and then I'm happy. And then there are other people on the other side of the spectrum that are really passionate about creating those sorts of processes and then rolling them out amongst the team. This was definitely done as an average, and with lots of qualitative feedback around it as well. So if people were happy to and willing, giving their opinions to actually explain their point of view, and that allowed us ways to cater for the people that didn't want that sort of level of involvement. An example would be the hiring. So even though on average the studio said this, there would have been people dotted all the way through who kind of wanted a lot of say in those processes to not a lot of say. Our hiring process now allows you to be involved if you want to be, and not at all if it's not your thing. So I think it's really important to try and cater to those different levels as well, but really making sure that you are giving people the opportunity to have a voice and input into it if they've said that they really want it. But yes, appreciate there's quite a wide range for everyone. Okay, can you please describe what delegated authority looked like before and after for vision and strategy? What changed? It didn't, I don't think it necessarily changed our vision. That was probably established kind of before it, but it was how do we measure that we're achieving those things. So previously, you have this kind of highfalutin vision statement, and what people are saying, having more say in that, is how are we going to define and measure whether we're achieving those things, and what are the steps that we're going to take to achieve them. So it was about bringing the strategy and vision down to a lower level, not just some magical statements. It was actually figuring out with the company how we were going to achieve those, what those steps looked like, and then actually going through and attacking them and kind of ticking them off. Hopefully that answers it. And are your questions and surveys available anywhere? I will add them. Check the webpage tomorrow. So NZGDC, blacksaltgames.com/NZGDC21. There's already a few bits and pieces up there, but I definitely add some more bits and pieces tomorrow. Do you have any general thoughts on building a company from scratch using these processes? I really do. You will be surprised to learn. So obviously, breaking off with Black Salt Games allowed us to kind of start again rather than introducing a process into a company that already had kind of baggage and a background and other ways of doing things. I guess it allowed us to take these sorts of concepts and just make them in from the start. So yeah, I think it's it is a good idea to try using these from scratch. Really important to still have your values first, though. Your values are going to tell you kind of the ways in which you're going to execute these changes. So I think, yeah, being sure on your company values and then being clear on what it is you and the team are actually trying to achieve together. And then that will go a bit smoother. Maybe. Yeah, I think that's it for questions. Yeah, anyone? Oh, Tim? So what were the standout moments in my, I guess, journey to leadership that, made me grow, stand out, grow, and learn? It's literally whenever I try and rolled out a change, like every single time there was something that I didn't think about, and I don't know, I think I'm probably of that personality that's like, I probably know best, so, I'll just make the decisions. And so it's really humbling when you think you've got a great idea, you share it out with the team, expecting excitement as well, as excited as you are, and then you get a whole different response to it. You get one of anxiety, of nervousness, of, oh my gosh, how's that going to change everything? And I think too, because you've already stepped through the change in your head, you already kind of know what to expect and everything, you've crafted it. So you're in a much more stable and strong place than everyone else you've just introduced it to and told them to be, yay, excited about. So I think that every single time, probably the biggest thing that I got into the routine of was understanding that I hadn't thought of everything. Whenever I did a change, I needed to allow a really good amount of time so I could share, explain, and again, going back to what I think I've said is not necessarily what someone else has interpreted. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth, making sure that what I've said has been understood as I've meant it to be. That's probably another big learning, that you think you've said what you meant and you haven't. So yes, thank you all so much.